In this video, I'm going to give you a crash course on using reality capture, which is a photogrammetry software. Maybe you've done photogrammetry with another piece of software and you're interested in trying reality capture. Maybe you've never done photogrammetry, but you want to kind of get into it. This is kind of the video for you, where I'm going to kind of go over the basics of working with the software as well as run a photo set for you. Before I get started, I do want to mention that I do have the photo set I'm working with available for you to download if you do want to work along with me. What I will recommend is that for your photogrammetry projects, make a specific folder per project. Reality Capture likes to spit out its own folders and files that are very important that you don't want to lose. Otherwise, you won't be able to open your project again. So I recommend create a whole folder somewhere that you want to work. I have a work folder that I'm keeping all my photogrammetry projects in. We are going to be making a very detailed Mango model. So I'm calling this Mango Demo. And inside my Mango Demo folder, I have Mango images, which are all of the images that I'm going to run. Don't concern yourself too much with how to do images or, conduct a photo shoot for photogrammetry. That's going to be a different video I hope to make. Instead, this is just kind of to teach you what to do when you do have images to run. So feel free to work along with my images so that you can kind of get comfortable in the software. I do want to spend a couple minutes talking a little bit about the navigation in the software itself. It is a little bit different. I'm from a video game background, and the navigation and how it functions is a lot different than any other software I work with in game development. So I want to kind of explain a couple of things so that you don't get lost and you understand where to find things. So first of all, when you open it up for the first time, this is most likely similar or close to the screen that you get where it's kind of like a help, maybe it's a getting started, but it's going to be the singular viewport, and it's going to be kind of hard to figure out what to do from here. The secret to this is up here in the upper left, we actually have little icons to change your viewport. So this is kind of like the default one single view setting, which kind of default to the help, but we have other types of layouts that we can use. The one I primarily use is this 1x1 layout. And if for some reason your viewport ever changes, you can easily come back up here and switch it back to whatever viewport you like to use. So the 1x1 kind of defaults to this, where we have our 3D viewport that looks very similar to other 3D programs you might have worked with if you've ever worked in a 3D program, and a side viewport here, which is called a 1DS viewport, which we'll get into in a minute what this means, but we can see 1DS and 3DS up here. And we can always change these viewports by clicking and holding on that little icon and changing it to the type of viewport that we want. Or if you mess up and it changes to something strange, you can always adjust it by fixing that icon. I'll go over navigating your 3D viewport in a couple minutes when we actually have something kind of interesting to look at to navigate around. So some other things to be aware of is that the tools up here are kind of kept in a tab sort of system. So we have our workflow tab, which are all of these. We have our alignment tab, and we have our mesh model tab. And these kind of in general stay all the same. But then we have, you see view tools, and why are these repeated? This actually has to do with this other tab up here where we see scene 1D and scene 3D. These correlate to our viewports. So we have scene 3D right here, scene 1D right here. And by clicking back and forth, we get some view options for scene 1D, as well as tools specifically for that viewport. And then same with scene 3D. We have certain tools just for that 3D viewport, as well as our view. So be aware, sometimes it can be really hard when you're first learning where stuff is. So be mindful of, what viewport tab are you in, or are you in the correct one over here? So to start, let's first bring in our first photo set. Again, if you want to work with mine, that's fine. There's a couple different ways that we can do this. Honestly, the way I tend to do this is I usually have an Explorer, File Explorer open, and I just drag and drop my folder into a 1DS viewport. And it doesn't, you can see here, it now says I have 149 images. I can then open up this little drop down and I can see all of those images. Yes, there are 149 photos of a mango in that folder. And we can see them all. They do put them in order. I will have another video that talks about, how to do the photography, how to make sure, what things should be named and all that fun stuff, but we don't want to worry about that too much for now. The 1DS basically means, it's a file explorer. So I can click on one of my images. It will give me information about it. Like it'll tell you, what camera was it shot with. If you have certain things enabled, it'll even tell you sometimes like what lens was used for that. But we get all this information over here. What if we actually want to see those images? If we kind of click on them, it will notice automatically change our viewport. And now we have a 2D viewport set up. So also notice that we now have another tab up here. If this annoys you, it's too big, maybe you don't have a nice large monitor, you can always switch it back to the 1x1 and then change this drop down to that 2D viewport itself so that you can click through and see all of the images right in here if you want to. So just, be aware of that. It's very important to know how to change your viewport. It's very important to know how to switch between them. The 2DS also has, we can also see this, all of them at once. So 2DS is so we kind of see almost like a list view of them. We can even switch this 1DS to a 2DS if you prefer to see them like this. It might even default to that. I honestly don't use this view too much. I greatly prefer to stay in the 1DS. This has a lot more important information. I usually don't need to see all of my imagery in this program like this. So I'm going to switch this back to a 3DS. So we'll be able to do the next part. First things first, I would highly recommend you get into the habit of saving often as you go so that if something crashes, something breaks, you don't lose too much work. Now that I kind of have this ready to go, before I run anything, I do want to start and save my project. I haven't saved it yet, so I'm going to do that for the first time. We don't have a file menu like we usually do up here. Instead, it is the reality capture logo. And I'm going to do a save as. And I'm going to locate where I want to put that, which is in my Mango demo. And I'm going to just name this, name it what you want to. I'm going to just name it Mango. Usually I name it the same thing as my folder so I don't lose it. But whatever naming scheme you want, I just highly recommend that you keep separate folders per project. Because if I go back to my File Explorer real quick and show you what it spat out. I should have just left this open, I forgot. We can see that we are starting to get this Mango Reality Capture Project item, as well as a folder called Mango. This is going to store lots of, there's not a lot in here now, but it's going to store lots of important information. You need both of these in order to reopen this project. You can actually, if you've run some stuff and you don't need to process anything, open up a reality capture project without the images. You won't be able to run it. You won't really be able to do much editing, but if you just need to reopen it and export it out, you can. But these are the crucial files that you need to keep together. So that's why I like to keep kind of like a folder per project so that I know all of this stuff kind of stays and I don't lose it. Okay, saved. My images are in there. I now need to do an alignment. This is where the computer will look for similar features on the photos. Hopefully you've shot them in order like a film strip, and it will try to find all of those control points that it thinks are the same on all of those images. And it's going to give us like a nice little point, you know, looking 3D model. Some people use workflow and just kind of go through here, but I kind of like to go through and actually just run it through the alignment. The workflow has like some like simpler commands. I usually try to go through like alignment and mesh model to run all my stuff. So if someone uses that, it's not necessarily wrong. I just kind of prefer it this way. So what I'm going to do is just click align images. Depending on your computer, this might take a while. This might take a little bit of time. I've run this before, so I know that it runs really well. I do want you to, one other quirk, I want you to realize this is not how long it thinks it's going to take. This is when it thinks it's going to be finished. So you can't see my system clock, but my system clock right now says 2:19. So it thinks it's going to be done in, by 2:27. It's not always accurate. Usually it's slow to begin and then it'll pick up momentum. And if, sometimes it's good, sometimes bad. If it finishes super quick, that might just be because you had a failed photo shoot and it couldn't really align very well. Sometimes it finishes quicker because your photo shoot was amazing and it was able to align them super easy. So I'm going to pause my video until this is finished. So you're going to see a little bit of a blip. So it didn't take too long. It took just under 2 minutes on my computer to run this. How long it takes your computer greatly depends on the hardware of your computer. I would recommend looking up reality captures, hardware requirements to see what it requires. There's also lots of forum posts, various places where people talk about, what do you need to run photogrammetry software, what makes things go faster. I'm not the person to ask about that. I usually have to look it up myself. But there's lots of information about that out there. So this is usually what you get. And this is one of the reasons why I prefer the 1DS is now that I'm done with the images, if I minimize this, we can see we have this information here where we now have something called a component. And we can see the component 0 is telling us that it has 149 out of 149 cams, which is related to our images. This means it was able to find the location of 149 of our images, of which we have 149 of, which means every single image aligned. So we have perfect alignment, which is awesome to always have happen. Doesn't always happen. As long as you get a pretty decent number, if a couple don't align, it's usually not the end of the world. If we open up this a little bit further, we can see, where it lists all of the images. Since we only have one component, there's really not too much for us to see here right now. What you might have happen is if it couldn't quite align the whole entire thing, you might end up with multiple components. So you'd see component 0, component 1, component 2, and it would list how many images for each of those are in those components. And you would have, there are ways that you can try to force it back together. That's another video. This is just to kind of get you started with reality captures. So stay tuned for videos to kind of help you if you do have issues with multiple components when there shouldn't be any. All right, so let's go to our 3D viewport. Now that we actually have something to look at, let's talk a little bit about navigation. So middle mouse button, scroll, is your zoom in and out. If you click and hold on your right mouse button, that is your rotate. And you can start to see now our kind of ghostly mango, where each of those little dots is a control point that it found on the surface. The more control points you have, like the more crisper this looks, the better your end result is going to be. But just because you have gaps in places doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to work. So be mindful of that too, of just because you don't see, um, it's not like a, as long as it aligns and you have something, don't feel bad if you have like kind of almost like holes, because this is just kind of like a cloud. So your left mouse button is kind of like almost like a dolly pan. Like it's not like a true pan. It kind of moves you in and out in 3D space. If you hold your left and mouse button at the same time, though, that is kind of like a pan. So you should be able to, use your view, move in your viewport with this. So zoom in and out. And again, if you get lost, you can always, fix your layout over here. If you get like really lost, if you hit the F key on your keyboard, F for focus, it should refocus your camera back on your model. If it gets really bad and it's really like F isn't working, nothing is working, I recommend just maybe closing and reopening the program. You'd be surprised how often that kind of fixes things in this program. But yeah, that's usually I recommend. If we zoom out a little bit further, we can see this kind of, these rings around it. What these actually are the locations that it thinks the camera was in relative to the object. And we can see these a little bit better if we go to the scene 3D and go to the view, and we find the camera scale. So we can scale up those cameras a little bit. And if they're large enough, you can actually see the photo it associates with that camera at its location. So this is kind of neat sometimes to see. It can be sometimes helpful too, knowing, trying to figure out what it thinks it is, and like where was that camera. So we got nice, perfect 3 rings around. So it should work pretty well. Feel free to explore around up here some other things. There's lots of different ways we can change like how this looks. But I'm not going to go through all of them because there's a lot to show. Let's go back to, well, first let's save, always save after a big step. And now that we have our control points, it'd be nice to make an actual 3D model out of this. I'm going to go then, we worked in alignment, we aligned them. I'm going to go to mesh model. A couple things you might want to fix. You don't need to fix it for this one, but just so that you are aware of this, is we can set our reconstruction region. What this will do, and that's what this box is when we actually go to make this a 3D model, it's only going to make the 3D model of the space inside of the box. So if you do a photo shoot and you have a lot of garbage, which happens a lot, especially if you're not working in a studio to do a photo shoot, it's a good idea to trim out what you don't need, so that you don't take a lot of time with your computer rendering stuff that isn't necessary. So that's that set reconstruction region. A couple of things you could do, if you're kind of in a pinch, like you're doing this on site and you have your laptop with you and you won't be able to come back and you kind of want to do something real quick just to see if it's working, you can run a preview 3D model, which I'm going to do. This is a super, super quick one that I would not recommend using the preview model as like your final one, but it can kind of help to give you an idea of if you need more photos or not. And this is actually really good for a preview. Usually they don't come out this nice, especially if it's a more, like a larger thing. But a preview model usually goes super quick to make if you need it real fast. The nice thing too, this will kind of give us another thing in my component 0 to show. This is our first model associated with it. And we can see that our preview model has 866K tries. So this means, that's a lot of triangles for a preview model, but we can actually do better. You don't always have to run a preview model. I just want you to be aware of that. What you usually want to do is run your normal detail. They do have a high detail. I've honestly never done a high detail. I assume it's going to take a long time. Normal detail has always been perfectly fine for what I do. Since I do work in games, I do end up having to reduce my tries anyway. I have never gotten something out of a normal detail where I've been like, you know what, I think I need a high detail out of it. There might be other applications where you might want a high detail, but I've never had to run that. So let's go ahead and click on normal detail. This is going to be the longest process. So, be mindful of that constructing normal detail, um, depends on your computer. You might need to step away from the computer for a little while. I've had it take, you know, I run it and I come back in an hour to see how it's doing. Sometimes the bar is going so slow that I put a post-it note on my monitor just to make sure that the bar is actually moving after 20 minutes and it's not stuck, because I've had projects get stuck where I don't know if it kind of froze or if I'm actually getting anything. This is also the process that your fans will start to fire. This is probably the most intense process that you're going to do, at least with the way that I do photogrammetry on your computer. I'd recommend not doing anything else while this is running, so that you give all the resources to the program. So like, don't go surf the internet, don't play games while this is going. Do that on your phone as this runs, or read a book instead. So I'm going to, again, pause the video while this runs, because you don't need to listen to me babble while it does normal detail. All right, my bake is done, and you can see that I have a lot more higher polys. I have 8 million tries. So, the surface looks a lot smoother. You can also notice that we have a lot of trash, and I'm going to kind of go over how to clean that up. But first, let me save it. Always important to remember to save your files. And I kind of want to show this to you now that we have a couple things saved. Again, why I suggest that you do stuff in folders. If we open this up now, you can see that we have a lot more files in here. Kind of a really interesting thing that Reality Capture does with the files is, and you're going to see this as we clean this up too, each time we alter our model, it keeps it so that we can go back to previous iterations of our model if we need to, for better or worse. I'm going to show you how big these files can get. But you can see we're at model 2, which is our nice high poly. In fact, if we come down here, if you do select things, note you can actually get information about them. Like my mesh time, you can see how long it took to bake everything out so far with everything. Not too long, but it's kind of sometimes neat to see that. But we're gonna look at some stuff there in a minute. All right, so sometimes you might want to do your base color first. Sometimes you might want to clean it up first. I kind of go back and forth. It's very easy to get rid of these floating islands. So if there's any kind of extra trash like this, usually I'll get rid of that first, but I kind of want to put a texture on it. Well, technically it's not gonna be a texture. Just because I want to show you what these are. Like, what are these weird things? And it's a lot easier to tell what they are once I color it. So let's talk a little bit about how to make the base color. And I have a preferred method. Other people might do it another way. If we keep on our mesh model, you can see here that we have two options. We have colorize and we have texture. Now, I don't like to use texture. What this will do is it will unwrap our high poly model, and then it will bake our base color information onto however many unwraps it takes. Sometimes it could be multiple. So for instance, right here we can see our 8 million try model is actually broken into 5 parts. Our low end, you see how it says singleton? That means this was a single model. This 8 million try one, it's broken up technically into 5 individual submodels. And when we start getting into trying to make a game model out of this, it gets a little bit annoying dealing with multiple unwraps, multiple textures, all of that stuff. We could try to cut it down in reality capture so it's on one unwrap, you know, and a singleton, but I kind of don't want to deal with that because there's a way we can kind of work around this to get out of reality capture faster and into our preferred programs, be it Blender, Maya, ZBrush, what have you. And that is by doing a colorize. So while texture unwraps and bakes that base color, colorize will just bake it into the vertex color. This actually takes a long time. That's also another reason why I really dislike using the texture one, is it takes a while for it to unwrap and bake that, where colorize goes really quick. So as long as you have the resolution on your model, and 8 million tries means that there are plenty of vertices on here to store that color information, this is ultimately going to be faster. And in my opinion, we can probably get a much better resolution on that base color as long as we do have the geometry to hold it. So if you're doing something larger, like a larger landscape, or if you're doing this for GIS and you're trying to get that, I don't know if you'd want to do that. I've never worked with anything that large. Again, I tend to do stuff meant more for games, so I don't really do gigantic things. So I'm gonna hit colorize real quick. This one, again, it's significantly faster. When I used to run the texture one, the texture tended to be the longest process. So if you saw how long it took to do normal detail, the texture does even longer. And then, if we do cleanup of the mesh, you probably would want to rerun it since you are cutting things out of like the unwrap. You'd probably want to take, save space. So it's kind of like a really long process. This is going to be a lot better. So I'm going to pause the video while this finishes up. And here is our mango. So it's a little bit easier to kind of see what these floating islands are when we do a colorize. And again, you don't always need to do colorize first. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to colorize if I'm cleaning up something particularly messy, so I can see where to clean it up at. And what these are where it kind of captured the stand I had the mango sitting on, where it wasn't quite perfectly black. You can kind of see here. And if you flip through the images, you could probably see the stand it was on. But, we don't need them. We don't really want to take them out of the program. So let's kind of clean these up super quick. So luckily for us, it's going to go fast. I'll have another video that goes into more depth on how to clean up models. But if, usually I do this process even if I don't necessarily see junk floating around, just in case there's teeny tiny little specks of junk. I don't notice at first because you might get like weird little floating islands sometimes. So we do this underneath Scene 3D Tools. And what I want to do is I want to select them and get rid of them. And it does use terms very strangely in this program. So they're a little bit different than what you're probably used to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, underneath Scene 3D Tools, Mesh Model, I'm going to look for this Advanced tab. This is for advanced selections. These are all kind of like your selection tools. It opened up this box down here. And what I want to select is this select the largest connected component. So what this should do based on this specific model is it should select the mango because that's the largest connected component in my scene. Then I'm going to go back to Scene 3D Tools and I'm going to find the invert. So I have the mango selected, which is what I want to keep. but then I'm going to invert my selection so I have everything selected that is trash. Then we're going to choose this thing called filter selection. What filter selection is this is the delete key for delete what I have selected, but they call it filter selection. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to get rid of everything I have selected, which should be all my floating junk. Notice it does make a model 3. This is what I was kind of talking about, how I can click back and go to previous iterations. So if I made a mistake, like, oh no, this is a mistake, I need to go back, I can click back to model 2 and I have that version of the model again. So, be aware that every time you do something like that, it will create a new model. So you might end up, with a whole bunch of models here. But that's it. This is kind of where I'm at with my Mango. This would be good enough for me to now export out and use elsewhere. So I have my base color. I have my nice high poly mesh. I'm at 7.6 million tries. I'm going to do a quick save. And I'm going to export this out. So before I do the export, I do want to show this to you. How large is our stuff? So just that folder alone, we are up to 692 megabytes, which doesn't seem too much. But if we were to edit this a lot more, like if there was a lot of trash and we had to do a whole bunch of filter selections and we end up with a whole bunch of models down here, this gets big real quick. So what I usually recommend to people, and we don't really have to do this with this one, is when you're kind of done, go back in and delete out extra models you don't need. I don't really have too many. I probably don't actually need that model 1, so I am going to delete that. But I do tend to keep my first one, so that would be my first normal level, as well as my last one. So, there's nothing actually to delete out here. But if you had like model 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 10 was your last one, and all those were kind of the in-betweens, and you hit the end and you're satisfied, I would recommend deleting all those, because you're going to end up with gigantic projects. And that's, kind of a hint there. All right, let's export this out super quick. So if you know a little bit about how 3D files work, if we are doing our colorize, since we're doing that, we did colorize rather than texture, we are storing all this base color information on our vertices. It's storing vertex color. The file type we need to use to keep that vertex color is going to be an FBX. We cannot export these out as OBJs. OBJs do not store vertex color information, so we are going to export this out as an FBX. There's a whole bunch of different places in Reality Capture that we can export from. Let's see. Let's go back to Scene 3D Tools. That's usually where I do it. Scene 3D Tools, and then we have the export option. What we want to do is export the mesh and point cloud. That's what we're doing. And pick a place to export this out to. Maybe you have a particular like export folder. Maybe you just want to export it right into that demo folder or the folder that you're working in. I'm going to call this, I have a naming scheme I like to do. I'm going to do it mango_RC for Reality Capture. You could also do like source or something so that this is the unedited large model out of Reality Capture, so that if you are bringing this into other programs to do other cleanup, you can kind of keep track of which export file is which. So we do want to do it as an FBX. Save it out. Depending on what you're exporting it out to, it does have presets. So like if you want to take it to Blender or Maya, or right into Unity and Unreal, you can do that. Depends on like where you're putting it to. The important thing though is make sure export vertex color is turned to yes, so that we can export this out correctly. You can actually export this directly to Sketchfab as well, but you would need to have a Sketchfab login to do that. And you can actually export out FBXs with vertex color painted on them to Sketchfab. I've done it before, but to do that, that's not here. You have to go underneath workflow, output, share, and then you can choose upload to Sketchfab. So that's always an option. Like if you don't want to do anything else with it, you just want to kind of share it and show it off, feel free, you could just upload that to Sketchfab. So that's it. Hopefully you have a nice mango for you to kind of play around with. I did kind of go over a couple areas super quick, but I am planning to make more in-depth videos on other subjects like cleaning up models, how to fix alignment issues, all of that fun stuff. And there should also end up being videos on what do you do with this model now that you have it? Like, how do you actually make this into a game asset? Because, you know, you don't really want to throw a 7.6 million try model into Unity. That would not go very well. So hopefully you had fun with this one and you watched some of the other videos.